I
I
think
have
I
to leave
should
you there for a
introduce Kevin,
moment.
if that's all right with everybody. We'll make a start.
Yeah.
Um, the title of this evening's talk slightly different to the one I said, but it's the same topic: the art of decision making in beekeeping. Yeah. So just quickly, I'll introduce Kevin. Kevin Thorn is a bee farmer with 50 hives in and around Lavenham in Suffolk. He's passionate about improving his bees to be calm, healthy, and productive, and working to educate beekeepers in this area. He and his wife Julie run Stour Valley Apiaries and Busy Bees Cosmetics. Kevin has established a bee improvement group in Abberton Reservoir in Essex, working with local beekeepers, Colchester Beekeepers Association, Essex and Suffolk Water, and Essex Wildlife Trust to reintroduce the native black bee to the area. So over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay, can everyone see that now?
Yeah, got that. If everybody
Great.
else could stick on mute, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, so um, yes, I think the title was Fast and Slow Beekeeping, and so the but this is the presentation. So it's all about decision making, knowing when to take action and when not to. Um, so yeah, I retired from HSBC Bank uh, over 10 years ago now. I was already a hobby beekeeper and decided that I'd like to do um, something with my bees. Um, one of the wife of the chap who taught me to keep bees made a comment that you can't make money from keeping bees, so that seemed like a nice new challenge. At one point, I had 140 hives. I've now reduced that down to 50 in around the village of Lavenham in Suffolk. Currently in 8 apiaries, all about breeding happy, healthy bees, but also um, maximum return from minimum effort. Julie, my wife, after I retired, was still getting up at 6 a.m. And asked me if there was anything she could do in the business to join me. So I said, I've got this pile of wax. You might want to do something with that. So we now wholesale beeswax cosmetics to beekeepers and bee farmers around the UK, including a couple in Cornwall. I'm not sure if we've got anyone in Devon, but we basically do these with our label, Busy Bees Cosmetics. We do the white label for people with their own label that we design um, with their logo. We do supply some people without a label and they print their own. What we found is that our customers that do this were previously selling honey either on market stalls or to retail businesses. And they found that their sales generally increased by about 50% by having this. There's up to a 200% markup on the price that we sell. We make, we design, we license, and we insure. So it kind of like takes away um, all the hard work. We'll be at the beekeeping show in February, so if anyone's there, please come and say hello. Um, so the key attributes of a beekeeper, um, I think there are three key attributes. First one is patience. Second one is patience. Third one is patience. And then knowing when to take immediate action. So that's what it's all about today. You know, this time of year, it's all about patience. Not a lot you can do to help your bees, but in the season, sometimes you need to take immediate action. Sometimes you need to wait and see. And then we need to avoid the time where we say, "Oh well, I'll just wait and see for next week," without any clear trigger for what you're actually looking for and what you're going to do. If you aren't naturally patient before you start beekeeping, it's a great opportunity to learn it and practice it. So, patience in winter. We all want to know what's going on inside the hives. I saw on Facebook this week beekeepers talking about what sort of um, cameras they use to monitor the heat in a hive. The thing is you can monitor the heat, but there's nothing you can do if you find there's a problem. So it really doesn't do you any good. Um, we obviously want to know our colonies are okay. I've had colonies that I think are dead, and then they surprise me in the spring. But if I'd have opened them up to have a peek, I might have knocked them over the edge. So whether they're okay or not, there's very little you can do to help other than treat where necessary and or well treat if you choose to, or give them fondant. You can heft for weight. Um, I've experimented with weighing colonies during the winter and basically found that they are putting on weight in my area. Actually, I should give a bit of a health warning, really. You know, my bees are in Suffolk. It's a very different climate to yours. I think we're probably on a similar sort of um, latitude, but we're very dry in Suffolk. We're the driest you can be, and I would imagine in Devon, um, on the border there, you can uh, be as wet as it can be. So um, please do take into account your local circumstances. Um, so just talk a little bit. When we get to March, a lot of beekeepers start thinking, well, I'd really like to take a peek. And at what temperature can I go in? Um, most agree 15 degrees centigrade, sort of like t-shirt weather. I have beekeeping friends in Scotland, and they say if you wait for 15 degrees, you'd never look at your bees. So it's a little bit more nuanced than it's just 15 degrees. The published temperature that you see is actually the temperature in the shade. So when it's sunny, 10 degrees in the shade can be 15 degrees out of the shade. Um, if it says it's 15 degrees and it's sunny, I usually find it's at least 5 degrees warmer if the sun's out. On the converse, wind makes it cooler. Opening your hives with a light drizzle when it's warm and not windy may be okay, and it will depend on the urgency and purpose of your inspection as to whether you might want to do that. If you're rearing queens, you need to kind of like do what you need to do on the due date, whatever the weather. Also, the amount of time you're going to spend in your hive is a factor. Um, it's like we will have done our winter treatments, and we can open up the hives for a couple of minutes, even when it's um, as cold as it is now. But you wouldn't want to be doing a 30-minute inspection. So in the season, it's important to have a plan of action. While you're learning, you might want to experiment, but once you've kind of like been through it, it does help to have an idea of what you're going to do for each likely eventuality. So, one method of swarm control, um, yeah, ideally one hive type so that everything is standardized to make so that when you do need to take action, you're ready with plenty of frames, extra supers, hives, nukes ready in accordance with your plan. Um, whether you want to expand or not, you will need some extra nukes, maybe an extra hive, so you can then expand during the season, but then combine down in the autumn. But you need your equipment ready because there'll be certain actions that you want to take that your equipment needs to be ready. I can remember when I was starting out, um, we had a swarm of bees in my apple tree in the garden, and I had a I just ordered a new hive from Thorns, but it was flat packed, so I had to make the hive. Unfortunately, the bees waited on the tree patiently for me to put the hive together, but we can't um, guarantee that's going to be the case. I've had swarms issue from a hive in my garden, and they haven't even bothered to hang in a tree. They just went straight over the house, never to be seen again. So it's im really important to have a reason to open, to inspect. And this kind of changes as the year goes on. Um, Before your spring flow, which might be earlier than mine, but mine is my spring flow usually starts mid-April. So mid-April, the bees are at least treading water, and they're not consuming more than they're bringing in. There might not be much of a surplus, but they're not needing feeding. But before the spring flow, um, so before the spring flow, um, it's really all about, do they have enough food? So you don't really need to do any detailed inspections. For example, if you were to inspect in March and you find you've got a drone laying queen, there's not an awful lot you can really do about it unless you've got a really, really nice warm day. Um, my method of dealing with drone layers is to try and find the queen, nip her, and then I shake the bees out next to a hive that I'd like to strengthen, and the bees um, will march in. But obviously, I don't want to do that on a cold day where the bees are going to get chilled. Once the flow starts, say in my area it's mid-April, then I can combine the colonies that are weak coming through winter into a stronger colony, again nipping the queen. So the weak colonies are the colonies that have just scraped through. They're on one or two frames. Um, I've found from trial and error that those colonies probably most of them won't make it anyway, but those that do um, will probably only be producing a super honey in August. So I find that it's better to nip the queen, combine that colony, assuming there's no signs of disease, of course. You don't want to combine it if there's any signs of disease, but combine it, and within a few weeks, that strengthened colony will be ready to um, take brood away for making up nukes. So um, by taking quick action, then you can actually be making up nukes in May rather than waiting for a colony possibly to come good by August. Um, when you get to the spring flow, it's mainly about swarm prevention and control. We get a June gap often. Well, sometimes we get no June gaps. The worst one I've had was been about 5 weeks. Um, and then your main concern is food. Always best to leave at least half a super of honey on to save, taking supers off and then having to feed. But yeah, so June's about the June gap, and then the summer flow starts, and then it's all about super space. By the June gap, the main swarm urges stopped. So in my area, so I don't really worry too much about detailed inspections very frequently. And the summer flow, so it's all about super space. Um, August, it's all about taking it off. Autumn, it's about preparing for winter, so food and treatments, and then winter food. And off we go again. So I think it's really important to have clear triggers for actions. I find that the books for beginners are good, and they tell you what problems you're going to find. They tell you what solutions are, but I find they can be vague on exactly at what point you should take action. So I'm going to give a few examples. But the key things that you're looking for when you are opening, in order of when you open up a colony, the first thing you are looking into your supers. So you'll be able to tell from as soon as you take your roof off and lift off your first few supers, you'll be able to tell, does the colony have enough stores to last until the next inspection? And there you're looking for um, really a super of honey will be enough to last you um, a couple of weeks, typically. And then also you, if all your supers are full, that's telling you your colony doesn't have enough super space. So I also operate with glass crown boards, so I can actually see into my top super. So on a day where the weather's not very good, I can actually just lift the roof, look inside, and if there's lots of if there's bees working the upper super, I can just slip a super on without disturbing without breaking up the main colony. As soon as you get into the brood box, the most important thing for me is, are there eggs present? So I'm not as soon as I'm opening it up, I'm not looking for anything much other than eggs, and usually I'll find that within the first 2 or 3 frames. Once I've seen eggs, I don't need to look for eggs anymore. The next thing is, are the queen cells present? And again, with experience, they tend to be self-evident. But I'll talk about these two, eggs and queen cells, I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Does the queen have space to lay in the brood? Now, this is something that I would say a beginner doesn't really need to worry about. As long as you've got enough space in the supers, the bees will tend to lift stores out of the brood box and create the space the queen needs to lay. But as you get a bit more advanced, you may wish to remove brood from the brood box when the colony is on 9 frames, and introduce more space. I add 2 frames of drawn comb every week during May to a colony that's on 9 frames of brood. I use the frames to either strengthen other colonies the frames that I take away, strengthen the colonies, and once the other colonies in that apiary are strong enough, then I start making up nukes with the excess brood and bees. The next thing is the colony developing as it should? So again, in the season, once there's a flow on, the colony should start to expand, and it should really, I find, double every 3 weeks. And if it's not expanding over a 3 week period, and it's actually maybe even starting to go backwards in spring and early summer, then you need to take action. And the action I take is to nip the queen and combine it with one of the nukes that I've made earlier, either in the previous season or earlier that season. Obviously, when you get through to late July, August, then the colony should be reducing its brood area. So, obviously, when it's acting as you should expect for the time of year, then that's fine. Are there signs of disease or abnormality? And I'll talk about that a little bit. And then assess the temper of the colony. And I think temper is one area where I think that we as beekeepers tend to prevaricate and don't take action as soon as we could. So triggers. My triggers for each of these are, if there's not enough stores for the size of colony. So if I've got a brood box that's only got 5 frames of brood, it's not going to need a whole super of honey. It's probably only going to need half or a few frames. But if it's not got enough for the size of colony, add 2 brood for the hive. That's 2 brood frames of food for the hive or feed. But to feed, you've got to obviously take your supers off. If my bees are working the top super, I typically add 2 supers. I tend to put more supers on than the books recommend because um, I might not be able to get back the following week. And also, colonies can expand much quicker than you expect. Now, this is something that's really important. Are there eggs present? Now, if if you cannot um, see eggs at the moment, it's something worth working on. And one of my beekeeping friends took a section of eggs to his optician and said, "Can you help me see these?" And he got a prescription that meant that he could see these eggs. A more simple request that another beekeeping friend found is, and I've used, is if you go to your optician, they normally test your eyes to the third line from the bottom. If you ask them to take you down to the bottom line, you'll get a prescription that will help you see eggs. Now, so anybody with good corrected vision who knows what they're looking for can see eggs. Now, I when I don't find eggs in a colony, I don't bother looking for the queen. If I don't find eggs, then I will put in a test frame from another colony. I never leave an apiary without a queen or the ability to make a queen. And that way, um, you never get laying workers because laying workers are suppressed by the presence of a queen or the presence of brood. So it's a really good way of A, making sure your colony is going to tell you what's going on. And if they do raise queen cells, you can either leave them to make a new queen, or if you wanted to introduce a queen, you can. Or if you wanted to combine, you can. So it gives you options, it gives you information, and you never get lane workers. Are there queen cells present? If yes, you need to perform swarm control, but you really need to do this fairly quickly. Um, while the bees are unlikely to swarm in the next hour, it's not impossible either. But if you do want to take your time to, before you take any action, go make yourself a cup of tea, think about it and plan it, especially when you're new to this, then that's not a bad idea. They could swarm in the next hour, they might swarm in the next week. They may possibly change their minds and knock the queen cells down. Occasionally that can happen. Um, space to lay. Um, Again, this is optional, but when my colonies get to 9 to 10 frames, I will remove two. So again, each of these is a trigger. Is the colony developing as it should? As I said earlier, it's all about what you expect to see during the season. You can keep waiting and seeing. If a colony is not growing um, after 3 weeks, it's most likely to start to go backwards. And while some colonies could turn it around, they might actually supersede and then turn that around. My view is that we're playing percentages, and the most likely outcome is that if it's not going forward, it's going to start going backwards. So it's kind of like up to you how quickly you want to take action. And sorry, when I talk about renuking, this is combining the colony with a nuke that you've previously prepared, either during May or the previous season. One of the things I do recommend is, take a nuke through winter for every, depending on what you want to do, every 3 to 6 colonies that you have. Most beekeepers would tend to, on average, lose about 1/6 of their colonies during winter. So having one colony in a nuke, polynuke, um, will mean that you come out of winter with a number of hives that you want most of the time. So signs of disease or abnormality, again, if it's more than a few cells, again, nip the queen, renuke. Temper, I'll talk about this in a bit more detail, but If my bees are pinging off the veil or trying to sting me, I don't requeen them. I've found requeening bees that have poor temper not to be very successful. So I found the best method of doing this is actually to nip the queen and to let them raise queen cells, destroy those queen cells, and then when they're hopelessly queenless, force them to requeen from my best stock in that apiary. So just on, are there eggs present? Now, I hope that those are slightly enlarged, so hopefully you can see the eggs in the bottom of those cells. That's what eggs look like when they've just been laid. Um, if there are eggs, great, move on. Um, and there's also no need to find the queen unless you need her for a manipulation. But I've also found that every manipulation I've come across that I need to do, there's an alternative that doesn't means that you do not need to find the queen. And I've actually got a talk on managing bees without ever finding the queen. So if not, you're going to pop in a test frame. A test frame is a frame of eggs and young larvae that the bees can create a queen cell from if they don't have a queen. If they don't draw a queen cell and there's still no eggs, then you can repeat that again after a couple of weeks. I've only found one example in all the times I've done this, and it's been a few hundred, that they didn't um, draw queen cells after the second test frame. But if they don't draw the second test frame, they're not ready to accept a queen, and any queen you introduce, they will kill. So you've got to be patient and repeat the exercise until. So if they do draw queen cells, you can let them emerge, or you can destroy the queen cells and combine or introduce a queen. If a test frame is ignored, they think there's a queen and they're not ready for a queen or combination. And also I'd say if you've only got one hive and you don't have a test frame, borrow a frame from a friend. One of the best things you can have in beekeeping is a bee buddy. I met mine on my beginner's course, um, and we've been helping each other with our bees ever since. If you can borrow a frame from a friend, but if not, rather than buying a queen, buy a nuke. Because if you buy a nuke, you can test the colony to see if they will accept a queen. Because if you buy a queen on her own, most of the time they're okay and they're just going to kill it. On temper. So I've got a scale. I started off with a scale 1 to 5, and I found that just using numbers wasn't very um, useful. I used to find that it would depend, I'd be inconsistent in my application of my own scale. So I changed it to a descriptive way. So you're actually describing the behaviour of the bees. And then I adopted from Joe Widdicombe, who most of you'll know, a -2 to a +2 um, num numbering system because it kind of forces you to consider whether these bees are acceptable or not. So my scale is stingy. The bees are actively trying to sting you through your cuffs, through your veil. They're angling their abdomen to you. And when I'm looking at behaviour, I'm looking at two or more bees exhibiting the behaviour. Bees that are pingy, they're pinging off your veil. Um, Obviously, don't want you to be opening up their hive. Buzzy, this is bees around the beekeeper, going around you but not making contact with you. And these are bees that you can choose to tolerate, um, but perhaps you wouldn't want to breed from them. Then you've got bees that are flighty. These are bees that are up in the air, um, but not showing any interest in you. And finally, calm, bees that stay on the frame and the queen just ignores you and continues to search for space to lay and deposits eggs. So I would say that if you've got bees that are pingy or stingy, I would want to replace them straight away. Buzzy, I can tolerate. Um, Flighty, I'm okay with. Calm are the ones that I will actually look to propagate. And just on temper, the picture there denotes bees that um, are not in the air. They're ignoring me. They just do their own thing. Um, whether I'm waving the frames in the air or not. So it's very easy to make excuses and delay taking action. When your bees are tetchy, you know, it it's very easy to put off even opening them. And if you were going through your hives and you think, oh, I won't look at that hive today, and you actually think about it, it's because last time they were a bit tetchy, then it's probably time to requeen. Often we talk about the weather. Now, the weather can make a difference to the temper of bees, but many years, well, quite a few years ago now, I acquired 5 colonies of bees from a beekeeper who was giving up because of an allergy, and she had bees that exhibited all 5 of the temper scales from very calm to stingy, and I can remember inspecting them as I could hear thunder and see a thunderstorm approaching. And the bees that were tetchy stayed tetchy, and the bees that were calm stayed calm. So that while the weather can affect them, good bees aren't really affected by the weather. They can be affected by the forage. Here we get oilseed rape, and that can affect them. But my very best colonies do not get tetchy, even when some colonies are tetchy because of oilseed rape. So there's really 3 types of bees. The ones that are always tetchy, those that are sometimes tetchy, i.e., depending on the weather and the forage. And then you've got your bees that are always calm. And it's kind of up to you what you are prepared to accept. It's actually very easy to move the temper of colonies um, if you work at it. But it's also, you need to work at it constantly because every time you get a new queen, that can start to drift away from what you're looking for. So, queen cells present, um, the type of queen cells present doesn't always determine the way that your bees are going to behave. Those cells in the picture there, everyone would say are swarm cells, but bees can swarm from supersedure and even emergency cells if they're in the right state. They do only tend usually swarm if on those types of cells if they're also um, full of bees, but you know occasionally bees can swarm when there's not very many in a box. And so if you want to control what happens next, you need to leave the bees only one option. So the position of the queen cells is an indication, but not an absolute. Supersedure cells in the middle of a frame is an indication. The number of supersedure cells is more telling. But if you have got 2 supersedure cells in the middle of a frame, they might swarm. So if you want to be in control, perform swarm control. Leave the bees only one option. Otherwise, if you leave them 2, they may pick one that you didn't want them to. When you perform swarm control, it's really, really important that you revisit after a week. Any queen cells that you destroy, the bees will replace. So if you've got 20 swarm cells and you knock them all down because they've got eggs and larvae, well, if they've got eggs and larvae, they will replace most of those 20 cells. And I think a lot of swarm people think they've knocked down the queen cells, left one queen cell. They think they've done what they need to do. The bees remake the queen cells, and the first queen that emerges, they will often in the cell that was left, the bees will swarm on that. I'll just touch on swarm control. Immediate action is needed. Um, one of the things the books don't mention is that there are different scenarios you might find with queen cells. First of all, you can often get open cells with eggs present and the queen is still there. Um, the second scenario is open cells, eggs are there, but you can't see the queen. And then the third option is you've got sealed cell, no eggs or queen. And in the third option there, their colony has most likely swarmed. Um, so in the first example, you found the queen, so you can make up a nuke immediately with the queen on that frame and add bees to that, add frames of stores, reduce the queen cells down to, well, in that particular scenario, I usually knock down all the queen cells because there's eggs present. The bees will make more. You can leave an open queen cell. An open queen cell is going to take at least 8 days to emerge, by which time the bees will have made more. But if you don't get to that queen cell that you've left within 8 days, and knock down the other queen cells, then that colony is going to swarm regardless. So I will knock them all down. The bees will make more queen cells. Because the bees have got eggs and larvae, they'll make perfectly good queen cells. This thing about emergency cells not producing good queens is a myth, um, which I've um, found, which I've proven myself. Um, so I knock them all down, let them make their own queen cells because it's going to take 12 days for the first queen to emerge. So that actually gives me more time to reinspect. Excuse me. In the second scenario, you've got open cells, eggs present, but you can't find the queen. The queen is probably present. So my method in this scenario is to move the hive to another spot in the apiary, make up a nuke, and bear in mind that I've moved the hive to another spot in the apiary, expecting the queen to be present, and then I'm going to make up a nuke in on the original location with a queen cell. And to make sure the queen isn't in the nuke, I'm going to shake the bees off the frame fairly carefully. Um, Again, you will, if you've got seal queen cells in particular, there is no chance of dislodging the queen because the queen has already moved into position where her head is no longer in any remaining royal jelly. Her head is ready to emerge, so you cannot detach her. But do it with a bit of be gentle with it. And then in scenario three, the colony swarmed. You can reduce the queen cell to one because they don't have any other options. Now, just while I'm on that, leaving more than one queen cell is also leaving the bees two choices. Some people talk about leaving two queen cells for insurance, but it's a flawed logic because if you have to, let's say you've got two seal queen cells and you think, well, I'll leave two, see what happens. What's most likely to happen is the bees will swarm on the first queen emerging, and whether the second queen cell is good or a dud, which is the logic for wanting insurance, the bees can still swarm on the one good cell that emerges, so you leave your colony queenless, hopelessly queenless. So if you want insurance, the best thing to do is to perform a split. So you basically split your colony however you choose, two or three frames of bees and brews with a queen cell, the rest of the hive um, with a queen cell, and then let them get on with it. You're going to have two chances of two queens mating, rather than risking no queens. Disease. Hopefully, you won't see frames like this. This looks pretty horrible, but this frame here was actually a result of queen failure. The queen was still present, but the bees, she wasn't giving off enough pheromone, and the bees had started to neglect the brood. I sent a sample of this off to test because I was disease accredited, which meant I was able to do that. Um, and it came back negative for European or American foul brood. It was just the bees. The queen was failing. The bees um, were neglecting the brood. But brood disease in particular, obviously, if you get foul brood, it's bacterial. It's notifiable by law. You need to call your seasonal bee inspector. For viral stuff like sac brood, I don't think anyone really knows the best way of dealing with this. I've tried, look, I've had it last season and two seasons previous to that. I've tried taking, last time I took the floors out of 14 colonies, they all died 2 years ago. This time I did nothing. Most of them survived. Oh no, half of them survived. And it also didn't spread to the healthy colonies, apart from in one example. So um, I don't think there's an easy option. Shaking your bees out, Dr. Giles Budge said at our association meeting that shaking your bees out or doing nothing usually leads into a 50% success or failure rate. And if doing something and doing nothing equates to the same thing, then it means that the action you took didn't have any effect. So I've actually found doing nothing is the best option, but you must do what you think is right for your bees. Um, Fungal disease, chalk brood nosema. A few cells of chalk brood or nosema, oh, actually, no, not nosema. Nosema you need to test for, but with chalk brood and chronic bee paralysis, if it is particularly bad, like lots of cells in a frame, I find taking the hive to one side, replace it with a uh, sterilized hive, i.e., blowtorched to sterilize it, um, put a nuke into the hive, a strong nuke with maybe 5 frames of brood, and then shake the bees out of, or nip the queen out of the hive, then shake the bees. Um, by shaking the bees, they'll go to the back to the original location where you've put the nuke of bees, and they'll be accepted into the hive. And you can take the hive away, burn the frames, and you can extract the wax if you choose, but burn the frames and disinfect the equipment. Um, and within a few within a few weeks, you'll see the colony is um, perfectly healthy. And then you can get pests like Varroa. Deformed wing virus is caused by Varroa anyway. So treat in the usual way. But I find that if you've got multiple deformed wing virus bees, your colony needs some sort of intervention, whether it's treatment. All of my colonies have drone, a frame of drone foundation in. So if I see deformed wing virus in the season, or deformed wing, should I say, then I can just whip the drones out and pop in a new frame in there, and I've removed most of the varroa in the colony. I'm not a big believer in using drone removal generally. I think drones are really important for the well-being of any colony. I think they're really important for getting your queens mated well, but it's a quick, if you do it occasionally in the odd colony, then it's a good way of reducing the varroa load during the season when you've got your supers on. And again, more than a few cells, renuke. And again, just reiterate, None of this relates to foul brood. If you've got foul brood, notify your SBI. So in conclusion, um, it's really important when to take immediate action and when to wait and see. For example, if you've got a colony, it hasn't expanded since last week, you're going to want to wait 3 to 4 weeks and see what actually happens over that period. Colonies don't expand one frame every week. It can be nothing for 2 weeks and then 3 frames or more in 1 week. So you just need to give them a little bit of time. Um, if you've got no eggs in a colony, take immediate action. Don't open your colonies without both a reason, but also something you can do. You can say, well, I want to check the colony's got eggs. Um, but if it's the middle of March, you're not going to be, if they haven't got eggs, you can't put in a test frame yet because there won't be any drones for any subsequent queen to mate with. So think about your reason and also what action are you going to take before you open the colony. Get yourself ready now, make up your frames, get your nukes ready, get your hives, spare hives ready, so that you're ready to take immediate action in the spring. Make up your nukes in the spring. May is a perfect time because you've got excess brood. If you don't take the brood out, the colonies might swarm. So it's good swarm prevention, and you're going to have replacements ready if you need them um, this year or next. So over to you for questions.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really interesting. So anybody got any questions they'd like to ask coming out of that? I've got one. I wanted to clarify when you said about when you're doing your checks, you've got those 8 things you're looking for, and one
Yes.
of them being space to lay. You said that if it was 9 or 10 frames, you'd remove two. Can you
Yes.
explain what you meant there?
So um, when the spring flow started, I'll be looking at um, taking out frames of sealed brood, shake off the bees, and then I will give them to colonies that have initially 6 frames, then 5 frames, then 4 frames in that sort of order to strengthen those.
Ah, I see.
And then usually what I find is, let's say I've got a colony with 6 frames, I've given it a seventh. The next week it'll probably be on 8, and the following week it'll be on 9 or 10. So I've got that colony up to full strength by the time the beginning of May starts. If there's a colony on 4 frames, I'll give it a fifth. I'd only add 1 frame to each colony because giving them too much can stretch them a bit too far. They've got the bees to cover.
They can't keep it warm.
Everybody's wearing glasses.
Oh,
It's all right, Simon. And but I also find that any colonies on 3 frames or fewer can't cope with the extra brood. It's stretching them too far. And also the colonies with 1 or 2 frames, I've already nipped the queen and combined. And then, so within 2 weeks, usually, all those colonies are up to production strength. And then I'm actually taking 2 frames of brood out to make up nukes. But I'm taking them out with the bees in this case.
I see. So, and you replace with foundation, do you?
Well, I actually replaced with drawn comb. So
Wow. Where do
in
you
the
get that
sea,
from?
well, in the season, my first brood box, my first super is a brood box.
Right.
So I give them a brood box of foundation
Ah,
above a queen excluder, and the bees will draw that out. I extract it, and I've got beautiful white foundation. It's also much better, it's kind of like it's pure white. It's never had any brood in it, and it's not attractive to wax moth.
mhm.
And I mean, to be honest, that was a tip I picked up from Roger Patterson.
Interesting. Kate, you got your hand up.
Oh, yes, please. You were talking about chalk brood, with your
Yes,
diseasing. I presume you were talking about worst case scenario.
yes. A
Both,
little bit of
yeah,
chalk brood is okay.
yeah.
I also find that, for example, in June, during the June gap, I sometimes start to see chalk brood or particularly sac brood when the bees are under a bit of stress through a lack of nutrition. So I don't worry about it so much in June, but if I'm seeing it during a flow, then it's more concerning. So it's kind of
Well,
like
and a
how much,
lot of it.
yeah.
Mm.
Usually bees will recover from a small amount.
Yeah, they're quite good at clearing it out, aren't they?
Yeah, I've actually had sac brood so bad that the colony perished, but
Really?
that was like 75%. You know, if 75% of the brood isn't viable,
Yeah.
doesn't there's a lot of effort just to get 25%. But
But
that's
before it
exceptional.
gets, oh, sorry, before it gets to that stage, would you requeen?
Oh, well, I'd never requeen my colonies. I combine with a nuke, but same thing, yes.
Well, then, oh,
I will nip the
yeah. So
queen,
you
and,
pinch out the queen and then
but
put it in with.
by replacing with a nuke, I've got a tested queen that I
Yeah.
know is viable, but I'm also giving them 10,000 extra bees, 10,000 brood. So
Yeah.
the colony can bounce. It doesn't just recover, it thrives.
So
Yeah. No.
you keep a bank of nukes ready for exactly that purpose, it
Yeah,
sounds like.
usually two to every six hives.
Brilliant. Mm.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
there was a question in the chat
Yes.
was asking about my record keeping. My method of record keeping is a bit unusual. I don't really keep records. Um, I I manage by exception. So I expect all my colonies to be in good nick. So I expect there to be eggs there, and if there's not, I do something about it straight away. If there's queen cells, I do something about it straight away. So there's not really the only thing I do record is and that's really early in the season is the number of brood frames because I want to during the spring I want to see how the colonies are developing. But I expect all my colonies to have eggs, no queen cells, and to have 9 frames of brood. If they don't, then I need to take action. So I don't need to keep records.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good.
But I would recommend that anybody starting out keeps records because I think that you learn from seeing what's happening week to week. So I'm not advocating that for everybody. I think it's important for, especially for beginners, to record and see what happens week to week for learning. But I think you can get yourself to a point where you don't need it.
Kate.
Sorry, I'm being. Is that how most bee farmers keep records or don't?
Well, to a large degree, I think so. But I think some people actually use things like um, bricks on a hive to indicate a colony's, you know, a flat brick means the hive's fine, a brick on the edge means on one edge means that there's some concerns, and a brick on its end means that it's done. um, and also some people use pins. You know, green means the colony's fine, amber means, you know, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah. Yeah.
or that could be, you know, the colony's waiting for a queen to mate. But yeah, I've found that there's very few situations where I need to wonder about what's going on.
It's interesting. I think we'll start doing lots of detail in record keeping, and then as time goes on, we just strip it back and have just absolutely the basics. And in your
Absolutely.
case, not
I
even
think
that.
the key thing is to think about what you're going to use that information for, and then what is your trigger for action.
Yeah.
If you're just recording it just for interest, that can be okay if that's what you want to do. But and I've experimented quite a bit with my bees. So it might be one year I record something that is not on anybody else's record cards because I'm actually investigating something in particular. So, but always have an action of what you're going to do with it. It's like, you said you've seen eggs. If you haven't, you need a test frame in there. Oh, I record the date that a test frame goes in a hive on the frame, and I record it in this year's colour. So I've got my marker pen for marking queens if I want to do that, but I can just write it in green in a green year, red in a red year. And by the time those frames, I'm back round to red, those frames have gone. So I can always tell when I put a test frame in, because that's obviously important. If I put a test frame in a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that will affect what I'm going to do this week.
Is that Mark? You're on mute at the moment, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It's very interesting talk. A beekeeper, a very experienced beekeeper, said to me recently, um, "Don't wear gloves when you inspect your colonies." And I did try that out recently, but um, what do you do? Do you wear gloves when you inspect or not?
I wear latex gloves.
Latex.
So the beauty of latex is it hides your scent. So I think bees can smell you, but if you're wearing latex gloves, it makes it more neutral.
Okay.
The bees can sting you through them, but if I go through 30 hives, I would expect to be stung once, and usually it's my fault. I've mishandled a bee. So I think it is actually really healthy to be in a situation where the bees can let you know how they're feeling. And it makes you more respectful of them. If you've got really thick leather gloves, you can bang them about and you're totally immune to them.
Mm.
In the season, I wear a fairly thin bee suit that the bees can sting me through. If I'm only wearing the bee suit without a shirt underneath, and it just makes you respectful of the bees, makes you respect um, you handle your bees a bit better. I think a lot of temper can be due to rough handling. I've often been called out to angry bees to find the bees are perfectly okay. Um, but I mean, interestingly, at Abberton, one of our beekeepers there, if the bees are going to be tetchy towards anyone, it's towards him. And we tease him about it, but it's nothing to do with his beekeeping. It must be something to do with scent, because they're perfectly okay with everyone else. It's just they seem to take a bit of a dislike to him.
He's probably wearing Lynx Africa.
That must be it, yeah. Or maybe he's just been eating bananas before he came out.
Anthony, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Angus, and thank you, Kevin. It's been fascinating. I just wanted to ask if you had a particular approach to experimentation. Do you each season try something new? Have you got a particular approach that you recommend in terms of thinking about trying different things with different beehives?
I think the key thing is, first of all, you want to only, I mean, it's a scientific principle of only trying to reduce it down to one variable if you can. With bees, it can be quite difficult, but the idea is you want to try and equalize the colonies, but all queens are a bit different, so you're always going to have some variation. But the sample size as big as possible, um, without putting your stock at risk, obviously, because some experiments might push your bees um, to the edge. Um, so yeah, be clear about what you are testing. Keep it to one variable, and do it with as many colonies as you possibly can. If you get a result on 5 colonies, for example, it's an indication, but you need 50 colonies or even 100 colonies. That's what sort of sample size the universities would use. And then they might try it on multiple sites and things like that. Um, so yeah, just bear in mind that what you see I mean, because I've had on average 100 hives, I see things that other beekeepers don't. Like, for example, I've found that 3% of all my colonies have laying workers in the supers with a laying queen downstairs.
Mm.
That's not in the books. That shouldn't be happening. I've also found queen cells in the supers with a queen downstairs and no queen cells below the queen excluder. And I only found it because I was showing beginners what supers look like. So queen cells above the queen excluder kind of like shows that bees must move eggs because the queen, it was just odd cells. It wasn't like a queen had laid it up or anything. So the queen was still happily downstairs and the bees upstairs were hatching their own plants. So all I'm saying is that when you've got a lot of colonies, you start to see real outliers, and you've got to be careful not to think that this is normal. You've got to say, well, that's not normal. It's also, if it happens once, do I really need to worry about it? I don't now need to change all my beekeeping and check all my supers to make sure there's no queen cells there because it's a very much an exception, not a common occurrence.
Any other questions? Anybody else got anything they want to ask Kevin? No? No, well, I think that's it. Thank you so
Excellent.
much, Kevin. That really was interesting.
My
Good,
pleasure.
lots of good insights.
Some really good questions as well. So thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And everybody else, I hope to see you in 3 weeks' time at Tavistock Parish Rooms for Rona Toft, is it, Helen? Um, Talking about treatment-free beekeeping. So that'll be a really interesting one. But yeah,
Fantastic.
thank you again to Kevin. Martin, did you want to say anything?
Kevin, thank you very much. Really fantastic. And it's always good to see from somebody who's got so much more experience, so much more volume than most of us. The question I didn't ask really, which is about hive density around a village. We've been having a big debate in Tavistock about whether we had too many hives in the town and whether that was affecting. But it's so difficult to untangle from the weather effects and things like that. So, but when you were talking about 140 around a village, that seemed quite a lot.
Well, no, my hives are much more spread out than that. I'm in a 10-mile radius.
Yeah, yeah,
So when I say in and around,
it's quite
and,
an around.
and I tend to keep between 6 and 12 in one place.
Yeah,
But our association president, who used to be a bee farmer, his best apiary he used to keep 50 hives in his apiary. Um, and they're also in a wood. So like the books say, don't keep them in a wood. And they did really, really well.
yeah.
So I think we can probably cope with a lot more density than we think, in my opinion. I've just kind of like tried to maximize the production. Um, it's probably not the most efficient way of keeping bees because there's obviously travel in between them,
Yeah.
but each apiary is usually 1 or 2 miles apart.
Thank you. Really helpful.
Pleasure.
Can I have one notice before everybody leaves, please? Which is it's the Devon AGM on Saturday morning. You should have an email from Judith Norman, who's the sec. So if you have a chance to log on at 10 a.m. on Saturday, it would be really helpful if we were quorate. Otherwise, the management of the charity gets a bit tricky. So once again, Kevin, thank you very much. And if we
My
can see
pleasure.
anybody on Saturday, that would be great. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.